welcome to the Leaders of Tomorrow, the only show right now on Indian television where you, the MSME, get sent a stage to voice your opinions and thoughts. This is ET-Now's special daily initiative to give MSMEs and entrepreneurs the opportunity to be front and center on every industry and area that matters to you. Today we're talking about the food processing and the agri-business in India, and to answer really what is happening in the food processing space and the food tech space, I have with me right here in the Mumbai studio Ashish Saxena. He's the Executive Director and CEO at Tex-Mex Cuisine India. We also have Kuldeep Singh Swani, Chairman of Swani Spice Mills, and joining us from Bangalore, Gokul Patnaik. He's the Chairman of Global Agri Systems. Ashish, Mr. Swani, Gokul, thank you all very much, gentlemen, for being with us here tonight to really talk about what is happening when we're talking about the agri industry and the food space. And there's so much that is changing as we speak, whether it's regulation, whether of course it is what is happening in terms of the monsoons and the day-by-day commentary that we're picking up. And we always love to ask the entrepreneurs who come on our panels to very briefly, for the sake of our viewers, talk about what it is you do. And maybe I can start with you, Ashish.
Sure, thank you so much. So I run Chili's Grill and Bar in South and West India. We are a company which is owned by TVS Capital Funds, and I work with them closely to also look at other investments in the food space.
Sunanda, we are actually in the spice processing space, where we do processing, blends, but primarily our business is in exports. So about 90% of our business is exports.
All right, so we have entrepreneurs who've been very closely associated with the space. But Gokul, let me ask you to come in at this point. We're talking GST, we're talking about the taxation that is levied as far as restaurants are concerned, small, big, large, medium. What is the number one concern for the F&B industry as we speak?
My number one concern is that disintegration of the whole value chain. You see, the food processing industry works well only when it is fully integrated with agriculture, with storage, with processing and marketing. And because of different regulations and different authorities, this is quite disintegrated. Between the farmer and the processor, there is a number of steps, and you know, the RTR, the marketing system, helps in disintegrating the whole system. Therefore, quality suffers, prices increase beyond any reasonable limit, and that makes the processed food more costly than it should be.
Okay, so that's a good point you make, and I want to come to Mrs. Swani on that.
I have a slightly different take on this. Okay. First of all, with the abolition of the APMC markets, the farmer now has the freedom to go straight to the buyer. What the government is trying to do is try and cut out the middle layers. And yeah, okay, there is going to be disruption initially, but eventually this is going to create a new chain where you cut out more middle layers and make access from the for the farmer to the end buyer, and vice versa.
But this happened about 2 years ago, correct me if I'm wrong, when the central government had said it was doing away with this APMC for
but
specific...
It has just recently been enacted. So yeah, there are going to be disruptions because, you know, you are breaking a cycle which has been there for decades. But I think in the long term, one has to look at it more positively.
Would you agree, Gokul?
No, let me give you a reality check. Okay. APMCs are still there very much. What the government has done is declare its intention, and there is a model act. Ultimately, the agriculture marketing is still a state subject, and all the 29 states, each of them have to think of themselves. Government has no doubt set up a national market. Digital marketing started, but it's only doing very few products, and definitely not in the fresh perishable products at all. It will still take a long time, but I agree, it's a good beginning, it's the direction to go, but we are still quite far from it.
Okay. Okay, I just want to come back to what governments, state governments, what the central government should be doing to ease this space, even as the central government is being very bullish as far as the food processing industry is concerned. Ashish, is someone who is very close to the purse strings and has watched this industry so closely. On which side of the debate are you?
So, you know, I think we are a very fast evolving economy. That's the basic. And as long as directionally we are in the right path, you know, investors are happy. So, as investors, we look at all of this, you know, as footsteps that we need to, you know, travel on to reach a stage which the, you know, so-called developed nations already have, and we're going to get there. That's what we see. But you know, sometimes along the way we are making hiccups. So you raise the point of GST, and there are 4 rates for restaurants, for example. You know, that hurts us. I think it's a regressive kind of a move to say we are going to implement this large initiative and then have, you know, 4 slabs in the same industry. Forget, you know, different industries.
Won't those get subsumed?
So there is different rates for different types of restaurants, right? And it just makes the industry, you know, challenge towards which rate we should be following in, and then trying to manage, you know, which rate they should actually try to get to. So it's a gray area. You know, we would have preferred a single rate for the entire industry at least. You know, not if actually GST should have been one rate for the entire country for all the goods.
But do you think these are initial hiccups that, say, by the time you hit maybe 2018, will all get ironed out?
No. So you know, when you set out a precedence with having different rates, it's very difficult to then change those rates and bring them over. So today you have a guy who is at 5%, tomorrow you tell him you're going to be at 18%, it's going to be difficult. But if you had started off with a single rate, that would have been much better for the, you know, industry per se. But GST per se, I think it's absolutely the step in the right direction to move the industry, especially the F&B industry, from unorganized to organized.
Gokul, how in your opinion is that going to pan out then?
Well, GST is definitely the way to go, but the way it has been put out, particularly the rates, has much to be desired. What's happening, I'll tell you, GST, it was an opportunity for the government to show the direction. 75% of the food products in all the, internationally, in all the countries which have GST are outside GST or very low GST, about 5%. In India, we are putting all the food products in GST except the raw materials. For instance, raw sugar and raw wheat and paddy are without GST, but the moment they are packed into atta, they attract GST.
That's a fair point that you're raising. And Mr. Swani, when we speak with entrepreneurs across industries, all of them tell us, yes, GST right now is a little confusing. There are a few grey areas, but they're confident that those will get sorted out going forward. Gokul raised an interesting point about prices. And as an entrepreneur yourself, I would love to understand, are we going to look at a regime of higher prices both for companies as well as consumers, you know, going forward?
Well, I think we have to be prepared to see higher prices because of GST. But I guess there will be offsets from a lot of the local taxes that were being passed on down the chain. So, yes, there will be a slight impact, anything between 5 and 7% on the consumer.
On that note, let's take a very quick break, but when we come back, we'll talk about the specific state regulation for the food and the food processing industry, and also talk about what you, the MSME entrepreneur, should keep in mind if you're looking at raising funds. Just stay tuned. Welcome back. You're with us here on the Leaders of Tomorrow, and tonight we are talking about the food and food processing industry with our panel of experts. Just before we hit the break, we were talking about prices, and the experts are of the opinion that we could possibly see a 5 to 7% increase in prices in the short term, at least going forward. Let me come to you, Ashish, and talk about what the outlook is for the industry when it comes to raising funds. We've been talking to those who are in the online food ordering space, and they're saying that there is going to be consolidation because there's too much money coming into their segment of the business. But for an MSME who's in the food or the food processing industry, what's the outlook looking like? Is it looking good when it comes to fundraising?
No, so absolutely. I think we've come off a a period where there was a slush of funds, and then last couple of years it's actually dried up quite a lot. People have got realistic about valuations. So the investments are beginning to happen again. We are seeing a lot of interest from not just private equity ventures, but also other large outside investors to come in and take interest in India. So specifically in the food space, I think a lot of hype went in the food tech space, the aggregator space, the delivery space. I think that's led to a lot of unreasonable valuations, and that's kind of plateaued out and declined. So you will see a lot of either shutdowns happening or consolidations happening, so that that part of the industry can reach a sustainable level, and that happens in every new thing. The fear of missing out. People rush in to invest, and then it just peaks much more than what the inherent business valuation is.
Gokul, Ashish was talking about the food tech industry, and I want to talk to you about technology, and technology, whether it's being used by the farmer, or technology whether it's being used by companies, be it in the cold chain area, be it in the ultimate F&B industry. How do you think it's being used right now? And if you had one piece of advice for MSMEs which are in the space, what would you say they should be doing?
Well, firstly, about the investment which has come in recently in spurts. Most of the investment has gone to the companies having front-end, healthy front-end deliveries and all that. Nothing has gone, or very little has gone into the back-end, that is the infrastructure part of it. And that's where I think we need to invest a lot more. The two technological changes that have happened in the industry in the last decade, I should say, are first the development in packaging industry, which has really come to almost world standard, whether it is flexible packaging or retort packaging or other things. And the second is the cold chain. In this area, the investment has been shy because there are long gestation period, and government has to come in sometimes. I think we do need all the private investment.
Sure, fair enough. I was just going to come to that, Gokul. You're saying government has to come in, but aren't PPPs really the way to go if this is a long gestation period? And why isn't the government taking a more proactive role when it comes to logistics and infrastructure in this space?
Yeah, that's the point. I said that these are long gestation periods. Normally, an investor, private equity or angel investors wouldn't invest in an enterprise which doesn't show short-term results. 3 to 5 years is the horizon. So these, whether it's a cold storage or it's a large pack house or logistic chain, it will take at least 7 years to break even. So this is where private investment is not coming forth, and therefore government needs to come in, whether directly or through PPP mode. I agree with you that PPP is the way to go. The best combination would be probably government's capital investment and private management. Efficiency of private management should be utilized, and there are some examples, some good examples of this. So a combination of PPP in the way that capital, whether by way of grant or investment, comes from government, but management is with private, efficient private managers. Okay. That would be the way to go for improving the infrastructure.
Okay. Mr. Swani, so in 2014, thereabouts, we heard aggressive commentary from the central government where food processing was concerned. That is on one hand. On the other, we had a spurt of food processing and cold chain companies that went the IPO way. So you assumed, this happened in about 2015, 2016. So you assumed that that space was booming. What is happening on the ground? What has your own experience been?
Well, the ground reality is that, as I see it, Ministry of Food Processing definitely has to ramp up. They need to enhance subsidies, especially for the cold chain, especially for people into food processing, because my focus right now is, we have about at least a 20 to 25% annual wastage of food from harvest to the time it reaches the consumer. That needs to be shrunk. Let's not forget the fact that we are growing almost 100 million people a year in population. They have to be fed. How do we do it? Our lands are not elastic. If we can reduce wastage, bring in more throughput, we have partly a solution. Food processing, by and large, will help conserve the products, get into the value chain, bring in access even to the rural areas. And I think that's the core part where the government really needs to focus and say, yes, okay, we need to stand up and provide the assistance and subsidies or whatever, so that there is more infrastructure being built. That's my take on this.
This is a fascinating conversation. There's so much that you can really discuss, but we're running out of time. So in the interest of time, I want to talk to you about regulation, and that clearly is the #1 concern for anyone in this industry. We've heard so much commentary on the FSSAI, the concerns there, particularly in the food processing industry. Maybe I can come to you first, Ashish, for closing comments on what the central government and the state governments are doing right now, the concerns and what they should possibly be doing.
Sure. So I think restaurant industry has seen a lot of action in the last 3 months, for the negative kind, where we've had regulations which have just sprung up from nowhere and disrupted businesses and employment, worth millions. So we are very hurt as an industry by some of these, and I think what the industry would want from the government is look at the existing regulations and laws and revisit them. They are still very state-led. But I think more importantly, any new regulations or any new laws that the government is thinking of making, at least let it be participative, engage with the industry, engage with the consumers, and let it be a process by which the public can comment on those regulations even before they make a law.
Yeah, so, you're right. You have to just understand ground reality before you enact something.
Yeah, morning you wake up and you read the newspaper and there's a new law which is going to take away employment of so many people, and without really having a debate about it. We have the media, we have a very robust public opinion systems. So let's use that. And I've been on the other side where, as an industry, we were lobbying for a change which was completely age-old 1978 law which we were trying to get changed with FSSAI. And the FSSAI took 3 years, a consultative process where they employed with the industry, with the people, and we toiled through that to get that change done. But now when I'm in this industry, I'm seeing that regulations and laws are getting made at the drop of a hat, without consulting, without having a representation from the industry around it, a debate from the common man. So we would really appreciate if the government took a step back and said, okay, these are the laws we are going to make, and this is the time frame we are going to make them in. Now let's have a consultative process. By 1 month, we are going to have the comments from the industry. We're going to open it to public for 1 month, and then we're going to come up with the law. And not just one fine day we read it in the newspapers and say, yeah, this is the law now.
Enough. Mr. Swani, I want to talk to you not so much about rules and regulations, but a sort of a policy framework, if I can call it that, a framework that the government has been pushing, which is Make in India. It's going aggressively to, going all out to push that. But that's more for manufacturing companies. Any way that your industry can perhaps see some of the benefits that are being doled out there?
Well, Sunanda, we are already in the Make in India space. We are in the Grow in India, transport in India, process in India, and what we are doing is export out of India. So I don't see any value for us in the Make in India thing. But yeah, coming back to FSSAI, if you don't mind my getting in there, whilst I understand your concerns also, but there is definitely need for greater enforcement of FSSAI to ensure a more consistently food safe product for the consumer. I mean, it's okay to build the law. Some of these laws are ridiculous, but the spirit of the law is not being implemented or enforced properly. That's a message I want to send out.
No, absolutely. For the restaurant industry, that's even more critical. There are laws which exist, but there is zero enforceability which we are seeing on the ground.
Okay, fair enough. But let's end this panel on a positive note. And Gokul, if I can come to you, while we do have a lot of challenges, there's also a lot of innovation which is taking place in this space. Let's end this panel by asking you about some of the trends that we've been seeing and what we can possibly expect over the next few months.
I think the biggest success story in the last few years have been innovative products which have come into the market. Small companies like Paperboat has really made it big by innovating new ideas and new concepts. And our own multinational, this Patanjali products are giving a run for the money to the international companies. So there is a lot of scope for innovation, there is a lot of scope for marketing, whether in products or in marketing. There is a lot of scope, and I think food processing industries, and particularly the MSME sector, which is the backbone of the food processing industry, 90% of the food products in India are manufactured by the industries, by the MSME sector. They should not lose heart, and they should continue to work for better products and better marketing. Yes, there are hiccups in the regulatory process, in the FSSAI and other things, but I think by and by, if we get together, we can sort them out. I am sure it's a question of time whether they also see the light of the day and they come in line. The regulations will be more and more progressive in future, and let us hope that FSSAI will also be more consultative in their approach, and the regulations will be scientific, science-based and implemented in spirit.
All right, on that optimistic note, thank you gentlemen for being here tonight. Gokul, Mr. Swani, Ashish, thank you all very much for discussing really what is happening in the food and the food processing industry. If you have any questions for us, do remember you can always write in at leadersoftomorrow@timesgroup.com. You can reach us on social media. In fact, you can tweet at me directly at Sunanda_J or call us on that number you see on your screen. We promise to have all your questions answered. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.